Nos reunimos hoy en la cuarta reunión, la cuarta conversación que hacemos con un importante o una importante personalidad del mundo de las letras. Es para mí un honor que estén ustedes aquí. Les agradezco su presencia y creo que vamos a disfrutar. La conversación será entre Valerie Miles y la persona galardonada, John Banville. John Banville es un personaje interesantísimo que ha estado lleva unos cuantos días en Madrid. Hemos hablado un par de veces y me quedo muy sorprendido de su inteligencia rápida y su sentido del humor y su sentido de la serenidad y de la responsabilidad. Es un escritor responsable y eso me gusta también que lo podamos escuchar. Pues poco más os voy a decir a ustedes, que la conversación está preparada y que le toca disparar la primera a ti, Valerie. Dispara. No dispares, pues si disparas, hubieras disparado sobre la presidenta de la Fundación Loewe, que es quien va a tener la palabra en este momento. Sheila, no dispare nadie.
Bueno, muchas gracias, Javier, y buenas tardes a todos. La Fundación Loewe lleva 36 años apoyando la cultura en diferentes proyectos, en poesía, en fotografía, artesanía. Por eso, cuando el Museo del Prado nos comentó el proyecto de escribir el Prado, nos pareció y nos parece una maravilla poder apoyar un proyecto así. Muchas gracias a Valerie Miles, a John Banville, muchas gracias al Museo del Prado, su director Miguel Falomir y su gran equipo. Y sobre todo, muchas gracias a todos ustedes que son los que dan sentido a un proyecto tan bonito como este. Creemos, porque en la Fundación lo creemos todos juntos, que unir las grandes letras con un museo como el Prado es una cosa única. O sea que muchísimas gracias a todos. And dear John, it's such a great pleasure to have you with us. And thank you very, very much.
Bien, quedan nada más que unos milímetros de la cinta a cortar para dar paso a la cita que nos reúne y justo para esta esperadísima conversación con John Banville, que es la cita de la velada. Y para mí es un inmenso honor el contribuir también a ese corte de la cinta, esta tarea. Primero, para reiterar el agradecimiento a la Fundación Loewe por su apoyo y su complicidad en este proyecto Escribir el Prado. Un agradecimiento también que le corresponde a Granta en español y a su directora Valerie Miles, a quien también, como saben ustedes, escucharemos. Y que es una formidable conocedora de la literatura actual, contribuye de una forma muy activa en el comité asesor de este proyecto, Escribir el Prado, y nadie mejor que ella para mantener una conversación como la que vamos a escuchar hoy con John Banville, en fin, esta conversación a la que hemos sido convocados. Y especialmente agradecidos, desde luego, estamos con nuestro huésped residente del programa Escribir el Prado, John Banville, Benjamin Black, también posiblemente para muchos de ustedes. No necesita verdaderamente mucha presentación y mucho menos para un público como el reunido aquí, todos ustedes. Pero, en fin, recordemos que le fue concebido ni más ni menos que el premio Franz Kafka en 2011, que ha sido galardonado igualmente con el Premio Austríaco de Literatura Europea en 2013, que el año siguiente obtuvo el Premio Príncipe de Asturias, Y esto se une a una serie de premios, a obras singulares como el premio Brooker para el mar, que obtuvo en el año 2005, y bastante antes el premio Guardian en 1981 para la novela Kepler. En fin, todos ustedes han leído con seguridad alguna de las novelas de Benjamin Black o de John Banville. Pecado, Antigua Luz, Imposturas, están entre sus novelas así como más frecuentadas. Los reconocimientos a la trayectoria literaria de John Banville lo son también, como vengo diciendo, a Benjamin Black, el autor que él mismo inventó en 2006 y al que se deben tantas novelas del género negro protagonizadas por el Dr. Quark. En fin, yo subrayo esto porque pienso que la escritura que se perpetra en los museos se puede sentir particularmente solidaria con el desdoblamiento practicado por John Banville, él mismo y su otro yo, Benjamin Black. Y si no me creen, les invito a observar las tareas de los responsables de conservación en el museo, tan pronto dedicados al difícil arte de la redacción de un informe de conservación sobre alguna obra, como a escribir un ensayo historiográfico con otros fines y realmente con una necesidad de vocabulario y de recursos lingüísticos y literarios y narrativos completamente diferentes. Así que muy bienvenido, hermano y maestro John Banville, y pasamos a escucharos. Chao.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias, Javier. Muchas gracias, Miguel. Muchas gracias, Sheila, Javier. Bueno, todo el mundo que está aquí. Hablo un segundo en castellano. Simplemente para decir, para mí es un enorme privilegio formar parte de este proyecto de escribir el Prado. Ya John es el cuarto residente o fellow que tenemos aquí, y la verdad es que lo que vamos aprendiendo con cada uno de ellos a lo largo del tiempo que pasan aquí en el Prado, y esta exploración continua del arte y la literatura realmente nos está enriqueciendo a todo el mundo. I will jump now over into English. Just let everybody know that, of course, if anyone needs the translation, there's some simultaneous translation. And welcome, John. It's such a pleasure for us to have you here.
Oh, it's a great pleasure to be here.
So I'm going to quote where part of our title has come from, which is, "Oh wonder, how many goodly creatures are there here? How beauteous mankind is, oh brave new world that has such people in it." It's William Shakespeare from The Tempest. Probably many of you think it comes from Aldous Huxley, and we'll talk about that later. But first, I would like to begin. We're going to begin talking a little bit about language. That is the writer's medium, since we're here in the Prado, and we will be talking about some of the confluences between language and art. We would like to begin, since we are talking with a writer, with the idea of language as a medium. John Banville distinguishes himself from all other contemporary Irish novelists, and probably most European novelists, by his level of intellectual culture, which demonstrates encyclopedic knowledge of the history of science and art, and in the case of art, both painting and literature. And in the case of the latter, evidently not English literature alone. John uses the English language in a country called Ireland. It's very odd happening that in Ireland, they have such a rich, long, incredible tradition of writers of the first order, And I'm going to just name a couple of them, and I'm going to quote very quickly, John and I have gone through the list, of a few writers who have given us quotations that probably we here in Spain have said innumerable times without actually realizing that they refer back to Irish writers. There are writers like Jonathan Swift, Lawrence Sterne, Joyce, Beckett, Yeats, Wilde, Irish Murdoch, Edna O'Brien, a country of writers whose names you don't need to use. The surnames alone are enough. We have Sheridan Le Fanu, who said, "Knowledge is power, and power of one sort or another is the secret lust of human souls." Wilde said, "I can resist everything except temptation." Bernard Shaw said, "Youth is wasted on the young." Beckett very famously said, "Ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better." And finally, Seamus Heaney, and these are just a few. We could go over and over. At home in Ireland, there's a habit of avoidance, an ironical attitude towards the authority figure. So, John, what is it about Ireland, which has its own language, that its writers appropriate the English in a way that somehow almost supersedes the language itself?
So did you say we only have an hour? This will take at least, yeah. Very quickly, the English language was imposed on Ireland in the 19th century. We gave up the Irish language during the famine between about 1840 and 1850. And the language that we got from the English was basic English, which was like the Latin of the Roman Empire. But the Irish language is a very dreamy, evasive, I always think of it as a mode of evasion rather than communication. And the English language that we got is language of direct statement, of orders, of command. And the tension between those two produced a new, for us, a literary language, which we call Hiberno English, which is very beautiful and wonderfully rich medium, but it is entirely ambiguous. We love the ambiguity of language. George Orwell said that prose should be a pane of glass that you look through at what's being said. For us, it's not a pane of glass, it's a lens. And lenses distort, but they're beautifully polished. So I think it's a struggle with language, a struggle to find a mode of speech, literary speech, between those two mediums, between the Irish language, I mean the Gaelic, which we call Gaelic, and the English language. But that has been wonderfully productive for us. This really annoys the nationalists in Ireland, who, all say, there was a disaster when we lost the language. And it was. To lose the language is a disaster. But we got English, and we took it, and I always say, look what we did with it.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. Well, not only the language itself as the medium, but perhaps we could talk about now, move into how art is such a fundamental part of your writing and your novels. You use the mystery of art, and what I think is very interesting that you talk about art as having a mystery to it, where sometimes we might think that art is something very obvious. You look at it at one moment and you see everything, and and it's didactic, and you explain the paintings. And literature, on the other hand, is more enigmatic. But you have the opposite take on that, which I think is very interesting. And you believe that this mystery of art is capable of, in many ways, explaining the enigmas, or at least capturing the enigmas of human experience. We could talk about frames, the trilogy. We could talk about the sea, and that you continue to believe that the languages of art have the power to illuminate and possibly even instruct, even if kind of at a tangential or at a slant. So tell us, what is the significance of art for you in your writing, using it in so many different ways?
Well, when you say art, I presume you mean the art of painting, yes?
For here, yes.
Because there are many art.
There are many different types of art.
I've always been fascinated by painting because it is, as I've said many times, it's the art of surface. But as Nietzsche, the great German philosopher Nietzsche said, on the surface that's where the depth is. I think that's true. We can't know other human beings. I don't know anything about human beings except what I see. I can only report what I see. I would not have the presumption to know what you're thinking or what any of you are thinking or what you're feeling. I can only know what I feel, and I don't even know that very clearly either. So all art, except for music, all art is the art of surfaces, of what is to be seen. And a book of mine from the 1980s called The Book of Evidence, if all my books were to be put together into one enormous volume, it would be called The Book of Evidence, because this is all the artist can do, is present, is to say, look, this is the testament of one, poor forked animal that lived on this earth for 70, 80 years. This is his witness. This is his testament. That's what art does. Nothing more than that. But that is a great deal.
Yes, of course. And also, continuing this idea of the surface and of language, would you agree that in some way we might make a parallel where we could say that words or language is like the writer's brushstroke?
Yes, it is. I mean, I here at the Prado, I'm so privileged because I can go very close to the paintings without being arrested. And to see a brushstroke is an extraordinary thing, because apart from anything else, this is the brushstroke that the painter made 200, 300, 400 years ago. And because he was close to that canvas, there would be molecules of his breath still held in that paint. This is an extraordinary thing. You don't get this with a novel. I mean, a novel is a mass-produced object. But the painting, the aura of the painting, the essential there-ness. There's a word, and I apologize to the interpreter, there's a word in English, haexiety. Haexiety is a medieval word, and it means the there-ness of things, the graspable there-ness of the object. That's what painting does so beautifully. I mean, I look at Las Meninas, I look at Goya, I look at Rubens, and although a friend of mine, I was writing to her yesterday, and I was telling her there was a Rubens exhibition here, and he said, yeah, I was just walking past a mirror, cause I got out of the shower and I was just walking past a mirror yesterday, and I thought, oh my God, Rubens. But that, sorry, a moment of levity. But that's what art does. It presents us with the there-ness of things, the graspable there-ness of the world. And, for instance, I have no time for abstract art. I agree with the Irish-English painter Francis Bacon that abstract art is mere decoration. Figurative art for me is the absolute, because this is what artists are here for, is to reproduce the surface of the world and to give it that extraordinary depth that only art can give.
A critic once wrote about you that, and especially with The Sea, your great novel that won the Booker Prize in 2005, that it's probably one of the most celebrated of your novels, but in it we find Bonnard and Botticelli and Tiepolo, very cold, de la Tour, etc., intimations of Francis Bacon. And he says that Banville, when you write, is being painterly, while harassing us by means of language. He says there's a discipline of seeing in your novels, of having an eye for things, including having an eye for eyes. Do you agree?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I was on an airplane once from Dublin to London, and one of my books had just come out, and the person across the aisle was reading my book. He had my book and he opened it. After about 2 pages, he went, oh, God. And I thought, great. Mine is not the kind of book you read on an airplane.
Yes.
You have to concentrate on the language. Also, I mean, there's a fascinating thing about novels. People think that when they've read a novel, they've read a novel. But that's just the beginning. You have to read a novel at least, if it's any good, you have to read at least 3 times before it begins to reveal itself. But I've forgotten your question. What was it about?
If you agree about the eyes, the discipline of the eyes, the discipline of seeing as you're writing.
Yes, I mean, when I was a teenager, I tried to be a painter. I had no talent whatsoever for it, but it did teach me to look at the world in a painterly way, and to value the surface for what it was, and to value the surface not for what I thought about it, or what I felt about it, or how I was feeling that day that I was looking at this landscape. The landscape is the thing, not what I feel about it. Whenever young writers ask me for advice, I quote them my only motto, which is from an ancient Roman, Cato the Censor. He said, rem tene verbum sequenter, grasp the object and the words will follow. And I think that's true. If you concentrate on the object, not what you feel about it, not what you think about it, not how you're, the thing itself is the thing. Mm-hmm. That's the thing to communicate. And it's in the age that we live in this so-called brave new world, with these damn phones that people have. People are constantly looking at themselves. Mm-hmm. I sit in restaurants and I see young couples sitting opposite each other and I think you should be talking. You should be talking to each other. You should be fighting. You should be declaring love, declaring hatred, breaking up. You should be doing things, not mesmerized by this ridiculous piece of equipment. Sorry, that's a little rant.
That was our.
I will now dismount for my hobby horse.
That was our other brave new world. No, but I think it's really interesting, your idea of surface, because generally, we tend to try and talk about the novel as the kind of the profundity, the abyss, you kind of closing off a space, and by closing off that space, you make it depth. You make it into depth. So it's very interesting to talk about surface, using words as brushstrokes, as language, as surface, whereby we get depth.
Yes, but again, I would quote Nietzsche, on the surface, that's where the depth is. Mm-hmm. The notion that, I do have 2 mottos. The other one is from Kafka, when he says, in one of the aphorisms, he says, never again psychology. He's absolutely right.
Yeah,
psychology is no business of the artist. That the psychology can be left to well, I won't go into my ideas about psychiatry and psychology, left to the doctors. For us, that's no business of ours. We cannot pretend to know, as I said earlier, I can't pretend to know what people are thinking or feeling. All I can do is present the evidence of what I see. Mm-hmm. And that's where the depth is in art. If, walk around the Prado, there's no psychology here. There's just surface. There's just surface. And the painters themselves may have thought that they were painting the inner selves of human beings. I don't know anything about the inner self of a human being. I'm not even sure that there is a self. To me, we present ourselves to the world as a series of manifestations, a series of attitudes, of poses. I go out into the world and, you know, I'm sitting here pretending to be myself. Tomorrow I'll meet my partner, my daughter, and I'll be another self. But I don't imagine for a moment that that would be a real self. Mm-hmm. It'll just be another version of me. Mm-hmm. And they would be presenting their selves to me. But this is a good thing, because imagine if we were ourselves, if there was... sorry, again, I apologize to the interpreter. Coleridge, the great English poet Coleridge, he talks about spilt religion. Mm. Spilt religion is, if you look at, for instance, the woke movement at the moment, that's spilt religion. Because we live in a post-religious age, and therefore, you know, people have to find a new way to pray. So we pray to each other. And all this nonsense, you know, it will end. I mounted a hobby horse again. I shouldn't have done that. What were we talking about?
So let's go back. So we are talking about, well, can I just read?
I realize I'm so old now. I'm like one of those old people who just rants all the time. You know, for young people here, I'm like your granny at the lunch table at Christmas saying, "Are these young people?"
The youth, the youth, as we say in English with that Brooklyn accent, the youth. I'm just going to read one line to you, because you often talk about also that you write prose, you write narrative, but it's actually the sentence is the important unit, and that you're writing poetry, not prose. So this is, and I'm very sorry to the translators for this too, but the passing trees tossed their tops wildly in the wind, and leaves flew haphazard, speckling the air, yellow with jade-green patches, burnt umber, floor-polished red. Streaks of rain glinted in the flooded fields, and a flock of small dark birds, struggling in the wind, seemed to be flying strenuously backward against a sky of smudged pewter.
Gosh, that's quite nice. Who wrote that?
It's absolutely gorgeous and absolutely painterly, but with bringing poetry in there.
Yes, well, I mean, I'm that kind of writer. There are writers who are far more interested in, I mean, for instance, John Coetzee, my predecessor here, he would never dream of writing like that. And he probably despises that kind of writing because he feels that direct speech is the only way to get at some semblance of the truth. And I had great admiration for Coetzee. I've reviewed his books and I admire them immensely. But I'm not that kind of writer.
Right.
I wouldn't know how to do what he does. Mind you, I might do a pastiche
think about
one day.
I would love to see a piece of writing that is Banville being Coetzee.
You know,
that would be perfect.
I'll tell you, a friend of mine said to me one day, he said, you know, I read that book of yours, I tried to read that book of yours, and I couldn't. He said, you do too much. He said, I want to imagine what's described in a sentence. You don't allow me any room. You use up all the oxygen. Your sentences use up all the oxygen. And he was absolutely right. I mean, in a way, I'm with the guy on the plane who closed the book and threw it away, you know. I doubt I'll be able to read my own stuff. But this is the only way I can write. And this is the only testament that I can give, you know, of my little time on earth, is to say as richly and as precisely as I can what I saw.
Yes, well, it's absolutely beautiful, even for those of us, you know, I love coming across words that, it's interesting because the English language is so, you know, has such a large vocabulary. I mean, there's well over 1 million words in the English language, and there's so many words that we don't use. You know, there's a tendency to bring kind of down to 200,000 word vocabulary when there's so much left there, richness.
A friend of mine said to me one day, you use all these big words. And I said, big words like what? Like marmalade and screwdriver and big words like that?
Long words, yes. Well, I would say that we were talking about this earlier, and maybe we could just bring it up. The painter paints on a canvas, and the writer paints on the imagination of the person who's reading as a canvas. So, you know, Olga, who was here, Olga Tokarczuk, she said that she considers one of the greatest compliments when a reader tells her that I can see things, I picture things in my mind when I read you. Would you say that is?
No, Olga Tokarczuk, she will suggest, my friend, who couldn't read me because he's too rich, he would read her, because she suggests, and Kutseya suggests in ways, that their imaginations are sparked.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But I don't write like that. I mean, look, in a way I wish I could. I'd love to be able to write plain, but I can't. I put down a sentence and I look at it and I think, oh, all the things that can be done with just that one word, to elaborate on it. That you have to like that kind of writing. Otherwise, like my friend, read somebody else.
Well, I think it would be really interesting as we move into talking about the paintings, some of your favorite paintings, that we talk a little bit about your relationship with El Prado, because you have been coming to the Prado since 1964. Yeah. So you have seen not only inside but outside the Prado change, and kind of large changes in a society, you know, coming out of the lethargy of the Franco regime. And the paintings, you often have talked about how memory works when you come back to see a painting after you hadn't seen it for a while. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh yes, I mean, memory, my God, again, how long have we got? We think we remember what we did, what we said, what we saw, but we don't. What we do is we carry a model of what we said and what we saw and what we did with us. This is why when you go back to a house that you haven't been in for 20 years, the windows and the doors, they're all in the wrong place, because the model that we have in our heads has decayed with time. But that again is wonderful. Wouldn't it be dreadful to remember everything? I mean, think of Borges' story, Funes de Memorias. To remember everything would be absolutely terrible. I always give the example, I was standing on a street corner in Prague, the old Jewish quarter, which is now completely gone. It's just an anonymous street corner. There was no traffic, there was no a breeze blew past. That memory is imprinted on my memory, absolutely. Why? Nothing happened, there was no significance. Why have I chosen, why is my memory chosen to and I think that memory is rather like your pet dog, you know. It just, it picks on things, you know. This is good, I'll eat this bone, I'll keep this. Mm-hmm. So, again, our notions of ourselves are inflated. We're much less powerful than we think we are, because what we remember is essentially imagination. Mm-hmm. I think imagination is memory. Mm. We imagine the past. Mm. And we imagine the present as well. I mean, the imagination is the greatest faculty that we have. Greater than hearing, greater than sight, greater than speech, to imagine the world into existence. Mm-hmm. And this is what we do at every moment of our days. We imagine the world into existence. You know, I walk down the street to my favorite little bar down the corner, and I imagine it into existence. And we all do that. This is the great gift that we're given. My pet dog, I don't think he can do that. Maybe cats can. Cats seem to...
They're closer.
They seem to have cracked the secret. But because we got consciousness, God knows how we developed it, but we developed consciousness. And it is our greatest gift, but it's also our most terrible burden, because of course we learn that we will die. In the age of 5 or 6, you suddenly realize, my God, this will all end. And we live our lives with this thing at the back of our minds. But look what it forces us to do. I wrote a little play once about a philosopher, Martin Heidegger, and the great Czech German language poet Paul Celan. And they had a meeting. Celan's parents had been murdered by the Nazis, and of course Heidegger was a Nazi all his life. And they met for an afternoon at Heidegger's little house in the Black Forest. Nobody knows what they talked about. But I have Celan saying to Heidegger, why did you join with the Nazis? And Heidegger says, because they gave due weight to death. He said, death is the giver of life. Death stands by the elbow of the what do you call the person that delivers babies? Stands by the doctor delivering the baby, yeah. And says, death says, give the child to me, because I will give it life. I will give it awareness. I will give it a sense of itself. And of course, I'll give it awareness that I'm always here. But that is the greatest gift that we can have, the gift of the knowledge of death. And it's it's awful. I mean, but also, we wouldn't be us without it.
Do you think we would?
What was it you asked? Sorry.
We're right there. We're right there, following the question. Do you think that
this is what paintings is one of the great. The immediacy of a painting is that you look at it and you think, that was a moment in time. Mm-hmm. Not only what's portrayed, but as we talked about earlier, brushstrokes. Yeah. This is a man or woman standing, putting a brushstroke onto a canvas. Mm-hmm. That's an extraordinary. I mean, to walk through a gallery like this is to walk through the past, the immediate past. The past is there everywhere in these galleries. Mm. It's an extraordinary thing. And it makes me slightly fearful, makes me slightly nervous, because I think to myself, can I bear the weight of all this art, of all this making, of all this regard? And I think this is one of the things that one should approach art with a sense of humility. Mm-hmm. I don't mean thinking, this artist is a greater human being than I am, because he wasn't. The artist, him or her, is just a grubby little human being like the rest of us, but made something that will last, mm-hmm. and is therefore, in a curious way, our representative. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you just answered the question.
Sorry, I really am. I really am my hobby horse. I have to stop. How much more time have we got? Ask me a simple question, I'll give you a simple answer.
Would you like to move to the paintings? That's simple.
No, I don't think we should have paintings up here.
No? We have them here?
I know, but I...
You prefer just to talk about them?
Yeah, I think it's too...
Okay. That's a very...
Again, as I
that
say,
is a very writerly...
Yeah, but also, no, it's not to do... It's what I said, that paintings are... Paintings are so easily available. You can have them on... You can have Las Meninas on the lid of a biscuit tin. But that shouldn't be the case. We should respect the aura of the work of art. Mm-hmm. And if we put it on there, it won't have its aura. Mm-hmm. It'll be an illustration. I'm sorry, I know you had this, and I apologize.
No, I think it's an excellent exercise.
Do you understand? Am I expressing myself clearly? Sorry. I mean, I can hardly understand what I'm saying, so how about the rest of you?
No, I think it's great. So we will have an exercise of respecting the aura, and we will talk about the painting.
I always come to the Prado to see Las Meninas. Mm-hmm. One year I got my publishers to get me in before the gallery was open. And I was standing there looking at Las Meninas, and I was distinctly uncomfortable.
Why?
Because I wanted people around me to keep me company. Because the painting was looking at me. And again, to quote Nietzsche, Nietzsche says, if you look long enough into the abyss will look back into you. And Las Meninas is a kind of an abyss. And I'm always, of course, as an artist, I'm always made humble by when I look at Las Meninas, and Velázquez is looking at it and he's saying, look what I did. Are you going to be able to do anything like this? And I have to creep away, you know. But also, one of the things about walking through a gallery is, I have a process that I do in the National Gallery in London. It's so big, and it's so jumbled in a way, that I have 5 paintings that I go to see every time I go there. And I don't, I try not to look, but of course I always find something. And the other day I found Rubens's The Garden of Love. Mm-hmm. Now Rubens is not one of my favorite painters, I mean, I can see the point of Rubens, but I can't feel it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
My painters are the Velázquez and the Piero della Francescas, the very cool artists who stand back and say, here's the world. Whereas Rubens is saying,
come on in.
Get rolled up in the world, get embrace one of these women. I mean, I'd be terrified to be embraced by one of Rubens's women. I think I'd disappear in a moment. But The Garden of Love, and there are 2 figures in that who are looking out, and they're, in a way, they have the same look as Velázquez in Las Meninas, but it's an entirely different question they're asking. They're saying, how about it? Where are these voluptuous girls? We're spilling out of our dresses. I'd probably be cancelled for saying these things, but cancel away, I don't care. And curiously, by a wonderful coincidence, I was in touch with an art critic friend of mine, Jed Pearl, in America, and he was saying that he'd just been to Prado last year, and that the picture he stopped at was Rubens's Garden of Love. So it's a wonderful bit of serendipitous coincidence. Mm-hmm. But that's the great thing about museums. And in a way I hate the word museum, because museum always has connotations of death, of something dead.
Yes.
The great thing about paintings is that they are alive.
Right.
I was doing an interview yesterday with a journalist, and she asked me about still lives. Still lives. And I said, the point about still lives is they're not still. They're vivid. Mm-hmm. If you look at that Rubens painting in the exhibition that's just opened, mm-hmm. Most of it is still life, and there are 3 figures up over here. Mm-hmm. But they're still life. There's nothing still about that. Right. All the animals in it are dead, but the way he paints them, they're vividly alive. Mm-hmm. The paint is alive. The whole thing is throbbing mm-hmm. with life.
That's wonderful.
Sorry again.
No,
what did you ask me?
No, that we're now going through our paintings, and and what I just read about. So the critic was pretty spot on when he talked about you looking and being a writer of the eye. That you notice all of these paintings looking at you. You notice the geometry of the glances that are taking place on the canvas between the people who are there, and also the ones that are looking right straight at you, like in Velázquez's Bacchus, for example.
Yes. And the wonderful thing about the work of art is that it is always new and it is always mysterious. The reason that we come back again and again to works of art, Las Meninas, or a great novel, or a great poem, or a great piece of music, is that it's not that it gives itself to us, it's that it withholds itself.
Mm-hmm.
The work of art is always saying, you cannot know me fully.
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to happen. And this is, you know, you can know a piece of kitsch immediately.
Right.
You go, kittens, you know, children, you know, all that nice stuff. But a real work of art is saying, no, 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 no. You can keep coming and looking at me, or reading me, or listening to me, for all your life, but you will never solve the mystery.
Mm-hmm. And you often talk about how El Prado is one of your favorite museums, to use the word. And is it because of the Velázquez, you think? Is that what brings you here, or is the attraction for you?
Yes, I mean, I'm still intimidated by the Prado, and so I should be. A great museum is an intimidating phenomenon. We shouldn't imagine that we can just walk into a thing and, you know, take pictures of the pictures and go. We should be intimidated by it. We should think, my God, this is an extraordinary phenomenon. Because none of these pictures was made to be in a museum. They were made to be in a church, they were made to be in a great man's palace, they were made to be in a billionaire's place in Abu Dhabi or something, but none of them was meant to be a museum. So a museum is, in a curious way, it's, you know, people go on about Napoleon Bonaparte, he stole all this stuff from the world, but that's what museums do. They take things in from all over the world and they say, here it is. And you can say, well, you know, the Elgin marble shouldn't be in London, or, you know, various paintings maybe shouldn't be here. To hell with that. The museum concentrates the collection.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it concentrates, and it is, in a way, synthetic. But synthesis is a great thing.
Mm.
It's pulling things together.
Of course, creating a constellation.
Yeah.
Now, I wonder though...
Sorry, I would really like to be able to give simple, clear, coherent answers to these
but you're
clear, coherent questions, but
causing us
I get
to
too excited.
Think very deeply about things and not allowing us to go slide on the surface. You see what I mean about the metaphor of the surface, that sometimes it can be against like you said about the word cleave. At times it is, and at times it's the opposite of what it is.
Yeah, the ambiguity of art is the essence of art is ambiguity. Nothing is definite in art. You can never say, I mean, mathematicians say that they can define things. They define it until the next theory comes along, then they have to change it, and then they conveniently forget. But they have more rigor than the artist has. But the point of art is that it hasn't got rigor. Mm-hmm. It's constantly open to new interpretations. In the Rubens exhibition that opened the other day, there's a wonderful painting, and it's not by Rubens. Right. But it caught my eye, and I go back to it again and again and again. No, it's not Las Meninas, it's not one of those big things, but it's a relatively small painting. But it is vivid, mm-hmm. It is vibrant, mm-hmm. It's just absolutely alive. And it was painted, 300-400 years ago? It's a magnificent painting. Mm-hmm. I wish I could remember the title, forgive me. But
it's in the Rubens exhibition,
yeah.
That was,
and it was thought to be a Velázquez
yesterday, or the day before yesterday.
You know, it doesn't matter what it's
called the workshop, the artist's workshop.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love the notion of the workshop. God, I wish I had a workshop.
Well, we were talking about the difference
people
between
write
an
my
artist
books
and a
to me.
writer's workshop, right?
Gee, that's a thought, you know. I could hire somebody to write my books.
And you can sign them.
No, but I could then go and rewrite them.
Ah,
They would put all the stuff in place, and then I'd see if a painting is done by the painter's workshop, he can add bits and pieces or take bits, but he can't redo the whole thing.
right.
And you know, I always feel, you know, in great galleries like there's a workshop of Titian, workshop of Velázquez, and I think those poor people in that workshop, they work so hard, and I'm sure they thought that they were doing that. What a magnificent masterpiece I've made here. And we're saying workshop of.
Oh, workshop. Well, in a way, I was thinking though, there's also like the editor, the figure of the editor, that can sometimes be hated or loved. No, but it's very interesting to look at the
Editors.
process. What's that?
Editors?
Editors. I was wondering you didn't react. I was thinking, oh, you just have a really good editor.
I feel very bad. I did a big interview on American television once, one of these big popular things. And the interviewer said to me, you know, isn't it true that the editor is the one who makes the book? And I said, what are you talking about? And then I thought, oh my God, I should have said something for my poor editors. I should have thrown them a crumb. And I didn't.
Yeah.
No real artist is going to be edited. You know. Now, my late wife used to say to me, I would give her something to read in the early days, and she'd say, oh, that's very good. And I said, my God, is it that bad? But that was just, I gave it to her to read because I knew it wasn't right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and she knew that I was giving it to her.
Because
You say, you're just using me.
Find something.
And I suppose there are creative editors, but I won't let them near me and my work.
Well, you know, I have
Cancelled again. I'll never be published again.
canceled. You are getting into so much trouble. I mean, I'm going to read just a little paragraph from your novel, The Book of Evidence, because this is somewhere, talking about Rubens, this is somewhere where I see often, there are these little kind of images or scenes or something that hearken to paintings that maybe you are using ekphrasis and describing a painting without giving the name of the painting, or you're making a composite of paintings, or you're bringing things together. But when I read it, all of a sudden I'm seeing, you know, a painting that I'm familiar with, but that I don't quite know. I'll read it. It's, I see her, my lady of the laurels, reclining in a sun-dazed glade, a little vexed, looking away with a small frown, while some minor god in the shape of a faun with a reed pipe prances and capers, vainly playing his heart out for her. I've seen that painting. I don't know how.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it's not based on any particular painting, but it is based on. I mean, I'm very fond of Watteau. I don't think he's a great painter, but I think he's a great second-rate painter.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And I've always loved his pictures, and that's probably. I love the way in Watteau. Not sure there are any Watteaus in this gallery. I love the way in which the figures in a landscape, they provide the light. They're luminous.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose only a French painter would dare to do that. Anyway, let's not get off on Watteau.
Well, speaking of
Get lost
light,
in the groves of
speaking of light, you also, when we were talking about paintings that you would like to talk about, you mentioned The Triumph of Bacchus by Velázquez, which also has
Well, I love
that
that.
play of light and the luminosity of.
I love that picture because it's. I think it's very funny picture. I think it's comic. We're talking about the time of Bacchus, where Bacchus is a rather pale, Rubens-esque young man, and he's saying, you know, they're all drunk. They're not paying attention to me. And the drunks are saying, yeah, we're all drunk, having a great time. The hell with the god. I think it's a marvelously comic picture. Now, I don't know if Velázquez meant it to be so, but I view it as a comic picture.
Mm-hmm. Well, there was, your other one was Mars resting.
Well, I love the painting of Mars because, you know, the gods frequently appear in my books, and they're worse than we are. They're greedy, they're lustful, they're vindictive, they're just horrible. You know, as I say, just slightly worse than we are. And in that painting of Mars, Mars is saying, I'm sure you know the one I mean, where Mars is sitting in his helmet, he's a wrinkled old guy, saying, my God, that was an awful fight. How many more of these battles am I going to have to fight? And I love the notion of the gods. I did a version of Heinrich von Kleist's Amphitryon, one of the great plays in European theatre. And the god Jupiter comes to Earth because he's in love with a mortal woman. But Hermes, my favorite god, Hermes comes with him, and Hermes is constantly mocking his father, saying, look at him, he's exhausted. And what the gods have come to Earth to look for is mortality. They're tired of being alive. You know, they're going to go on forever. And Hermes says, my father, he comes, he makes love to these mortal women in the hope that he'll die, that he'll learn about mortality. This is a beautiful notion, isn't it? Sorry, again, I'm rambling.
Well, we're going to, I have one last question before we move on to listening to you read from your novel, The Infinities. And I just wanted to ask, I'm not quite sure how you're going to feel about this, but what about the concept of redemption, of art as being something that provides redemption? We've talked about this before, but does art represent our only, or at least our best, hope in this brave new world?
Well, what art offers is absolute truth. You cannot lie in art. The artist can be a liar, and God knows. I've told many lies in my time myself. But the artist is of no significance. The work of art has to be true, because if it's not true, it's kitsch. Mm-hmm. And in the world that we live in now, the world that we've blundered into, a world where truth is a very shaky concept, art could be a shining light. Because artists cannot do other than be truthful. In art, as I have emphasized that, we're grubby little, awful little liars like everybody else. But when we make art, we have to make art, because if we don't, as I say, it becomes kitsch. And kitsch is the essence of untruth.
Just one quick, with Kundera, Kundera has tried to somehow defend the idea of kitsch. What do you think about that?
Oh, kitsch is kitsch,
Kitsch
is wonderful. Look, for God's sake.
Or count.
Most of human beings live with kitsch. They put things on their walls and pink coverlets on their beds. And kitsch is where we live. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, and I'm not one of those artists who despises, the masses. I love the masses.
You like...
God, I sound like Trump there, didn't I? Vote for me. But for instance, I love the art of cinema. As we were saying the other day, the art of cinema is the poetry of the people. People are not intimidated by the movies. you know, when I was a teenager, my cousin and I used to come, we lived in a small town in south of Ireland. We would come to Dublin to watch movies by Antonioni and Banville and all those wonderful people. We didn't understand them, but we didn't feel afraid of them. Whereas if we'd been presented with Las Meninas, we might have said, oh, well, I don't understand that. The great thing about the movies is that everybody can understand it.
Yeah.
Sorry, was that what you were asking?
No, that's what I was asking exactly. In the past couple of days about how you...
Redemption, I don't think, is available to us. It's like that wonderful thing that Kafka said, remember? Max Brod, poor Max Brod, he was so dull. He was such a good man. But he said to Kafka, so there's no hope, is there? Kafka said, oh yes, of course there's hope. There's an infinity of hope, but not for us. So there is redemption, but not for us.
But not
look,
but on the good side.
you go and stand in front of Las Meninas or the Garden of Love or that wonderful painting by the painter I can't remember. That's a kind of redemption. For a moment, this is all we can hope for. We're not going to be assumed into heaven like the Virgin Mary. This is not going to happen. We're going to die and we're going to be gone. But for that moment, that's redemption enough, isn't it? I would think so. And you know, it's not just in art. People get it in sport. You know, a huge 40,000 people sitting at a football match, and they're getting that's how they get their sense of the aesthetic, of the beauty. In English, soccer is referred to as the beautiful game. I don't know anything about sport, but I can understand that that's so. It's not just art.
Shall we read from your...
I will read one paragraph from this book.
Would you set us up a little?
Seamus Heaney's wife, Mary, who was one of the funniest human beings I've ever met, she said, she used to say, there's no such thing as a short poetry reading. So I will make this as short as I can. This is from a book called The Infinities. The god Hermes is speaking here, and that's really all you need to know. Of the things we fashioned for them, that they might be comforted, dawn is the one that works. When darkness sifts from the air like fine soft soot, and light spreads slowly out of the east, then all but the most wretched of humankind rally. It is a spectacle we mortals enjoy, this minor daily resurrection. Often we will gather at the ramparts of the clouds and gaze down upon them, our little ones, as they bestir themselves to welcome the new day. What a silence falls upon us then, the sad silence of our envy. Many of them sleep on, of course, careless of our cousin Aurora's charming matutinal trick. But there are always the insomniacs, the restless ill, the lovelorn tossing on the solitary beds, or just the early risers, the busy ones, with their knee bends and their cold showers and their fussy little cups of black ambrosia. Yes, all who witness it greet the dawn with joy, more or less, except, of course, the condemned man, for whom first light will be the last on earth. Thank you. Thank you, my dear.
Well,
Wasn't she amazingly generous?
Well, I went with it.
Yours is a hard job.
I actually had a script.
Occasions like this.
Well, I think it's wonderful, actually, that we brought a little bit of John Berger in here, actually, in case anyone noticed. A little Berger, a little bit of Benjamin with the aura, and we've spoken about the paintings ekphrastically, which is the area of the writer and the poet. So you've given us a very interesting lesson on actually...
Actually, when you talk about ekphrasis, which, you know, is the description of a painting in prose, maybe that's what has driven me to be a writer. Failed painter.
Exactly.
Painting words.
Painting words, absolutely.
First time it struck me.
That could have been the name of...
My age, terrible realization.
So,
thank you all.
Thank you very much to everyone for being here. John will be signing books now, so you'll have a chance to talk to him a little bit afterwards. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, John.